My friend, and what I hope we all can convince him to run for president, U.S. Senator Rand Paul. One more quick thing. Typically when he comes, so I talk to people, they're like, what's Rand like? Like, when the cameras are off, what's he like? I mean, look, he's one of us. He's just a normal, everyday guy with scabs on his knees and dirt under his fingernails. I love that he always shows up in a pair of Levi's.
I'm trying to dress up for you. But if Andy's not going to wear his coat, I'm taking my coat off. So I want to thank Andy and Lori for having us to their great restaurant and just for being here. People ask me what's the biggest problem we have, and everyone says, is it Obamacare? Is it immigration? Is it this? Is it that? Is it Dodd-Frank? Is it regulations? All of those are terrible problems. But the biggest problem we face in our country is a breakdown in the separation of powers. Our founding fathers had so much forethought when they said, let's divide it into these different branches, and there would be checks and balances, ambition pitted against ambition to try to check the power. But for probably 30, 40, 50 years now, we've been letting more power go from us or from our representatives and gravitate to the executive. You have bills like Obamacare that are 2,000 pages long, but the regulations are 20,000 pages long. Dodd-Frank, what some people call the Obamacare for banks, it's 10,000 pages of regulations. You now have over 200 regulations every year that are written by the executive branch. Each one of them costs the economy over $100 million. And they're all written by unelected bureaucrats. The most important things going on, the most expensive things going on in your government, I don't have any say in them. So something's really wrong with our government, and as a consequence, we're borrowing $1 million a minute. The way we run our budget and our spending is obscene. It's probably been 40 years since we passed all of the individual appropriation bills. You keep hearing these crazy names. They call it a cromnibus or an omnibus, or I call it the crumnibus. But it's just a collection of all the spending bills put into one package. You get it the same day you're going to vote on it, which is against the rules, and they insist we vote on a 2,000-page bill that no one can read, will read, or ever reads. It's unamendable, so anything that's wrong with government never gets fixed, and then we lurch on to the next deadline, and then we do the same thing again. And people wonder why Congress has a 10% approval rating. We're in charge now. We're going to do things differently, and I'm insisting every day in my caucus. I don't want to pass 5 out of the 12 bills. I don't want to pass 7 out of 12 bills. I don't want to be twice as good as the Democrats. I just want to do what we're supposed to do. Pass every appropriation bill. But on every bill, we should write thousands of instructions on how to spend the money. The power of the purse is in writing instructions, telling the president how to spend the money, which is us taking the power back, and then the power is a congressional power. That's the power of the purse. The power of the purse isn't up or down on spending money. It's spending money and how we spend the money. For example, one instruction we might be able to give the president is, he decided, the administration a couple years ago, they would spend $1 million discovering or trying to discover whether male fruit flies like younger female fruit flies. I think we could poll the audience probably and save $1 million, okay? So things like that, there should be some oversight. If they say, oh, well, Congress shouldn't have anything to do with science, make the scientists write up a list of what they want to study, and it should come back and be approved. I mean, there needs to be oversight. But really our big problem is this loss of the equilibrium between the powers. This collapse of the separation of powers is the biggest problem that we face in the country. The way to get it back is to have assertive people in Congress to try to grab it back. The biggest threat to our country is debt. We've got to do something about it. You could destroy the fabric of the currency, and you could destroy the underpinnings of the entire society if you are not careful with the amount of debt you pile on and how fast you pile it on. I'm not ready to give up. There are things that we can work together on. I am disappointed with the president so far. First 2 things that we've given him are the softballs. These are the things we actually have agreement. The Keystone Pipeline has 6, 8, 10 Democrats that are going to vote for it in the Senate. It's got 40 Democrats in the House. It's got almost enough to override a veto. And we haven't heard a peep from him exactly why he's going to veto it. Is he worried about safety? Propose a regulation to put on the pipeline bill, and I'll bet you it passes. He hasn't proposed anything. He just said my way or the highway, and I'm not voting on this. It's a project that will create 40,000 jobs. So they have all these bizarre arguments against doing it. We have pipelines all over the country. They're actually safer than transporting oil by rail. So there's all kinds of arguments for it. We took another low-hanging fruit, and that's Obamacare. I'd repeal the whole thing. Yes. But I'd also repeal parts of it if we can. So the first thing that has been proposed is, if Andy employs somebody and they work 32 hours, and he has over 50 workers, if they work 32 hours, all of a sudden they have to have the government mandated insurance. Not just insurance, the government mandated insurance. We've talked about changing that from 30 hours to 40 hours. Why? Because we actually sympathize with the workers who work 32 hours who are given now 28 hours. When you add up all the hours lost from employers giving workers less hours so they don't have to provide insurance, it's 2.5 million jobs, the equivalent of 2.5 million jobs. This is an easy thing that could be tweaked in Obamacare. It doesn't fix Obamacare, it fixes one of the worst parts of Obamacare, and the President said he's going to veto both of these. So that's a real question. Who's the intransigents, the Republicans or the President? And I think clearly it's looking like the President is going to say his way or the highway. On some things we can work together, and there is a possibility for progress. One of the things I'm pushing very hard on, I'm working with Barbara Boxer, a progressive Democrat, and there is chance for bipartisan support, and the President voted for in 2005, is to let American profit that's overseas come home, or encourage it to come home by lowering the tax rate. Currently, if an American company makes money overseas, they pay the rate over there, and they have to pay again to come home. It's currently 35% in addition to what they pay in Europe or Asia. Well, other countries don't have this. It's non-competitive, and as a consequence, there's $2 trillion overseas. We did it in 2005. We lowered the rate for a year, and $300 billion came home. That's about half as big as the President's so-called government stimulus, but this would be a private stimulus, bringing that money home. There's now twice as much money overseas. I'm for lowering the rate, trying to encourage that money to come home. It could be as big as $600 or $700 billion would come home. And it would go into productive business. I wouldn't be choosing where it goes. It would be going to people who pay taxes. Apple's got $180 billion overseas, and they're not bringing it home. They borrowed money to pay their dividends, and I don't blame them. They're just trying to not get, the beat over the head with the tax system. But at the same time, that money can come home, and will come home if we give it a fair tax rate. So that's one issue I am working very hard in the next couple of months. I would put it on the highway bill and take that tax money and put it into the highway fund, which is $15 billion short every year. One other issue I'm working with the other side on is I've worked with Cory Booker some on criminal justice reform. And we have gone crazy on criminal justice. We have 24-year-old kid selling $300 worth of marijuana that gets 55 years in prison. I kind of flippantly say in Kentucky you can kill someone and be eligible for parole in 12. All right? 31-year-old nurse who's an addict, and I'm not justifying drugs. Drugs are bad, and you shouldn't use them. We should try to keep our kids from using them, but our kids do make mistakes. 31-year-old nurse is an addict. She writes a prescription, which is illegal, for a Lortab. She gets it. What's her penalty? 15 years in prison. We're giving double life sentences. We've just gone overboard on all this stuff. But then you add into the mix is that if you look at who the people are that get caught up in this criminal injustice, they're black, they're African American, they're Hispanic, and they're poor. And not on purpose. I don't blame the police. I don't think the police are out there saying, let's go put black people or Hispanic people in prison. But that is the result. And it's just the result of the way we, where police go. And over time, it adds up. And so if you look at statistics on who uses drugs, white kids use drugs at about the same rate as black kids. White kids are 4 times greater in the population than black kids, but in the prison, it's the opposite. 3 out of 4 people in prison are black or brown. Something's gone really wrong with the war on drugs. And I think that Republicans are ready to hear this, but I think it's also a bipartisan thing that we can find better justice. It's something I'm going to continue to work on.